I'm Shane Thomas, and this is Analysing Doctor Who. I'm joined by Chris Coker and Mike Robinson, and we are here to analyse the reality war. And if you have any thoughts on our upcoming thoughts or anything else Doctor Who based, you can email us at analysingdoctorwho@gmail.com. So if we start with our episode rating out of 10, would you give this out of 10, please, Mike?
I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10, which isn't all that negative, but it's negative for me.
Okay, your rating, Chris?
I said 4.
I think I maybe actually liked it more than both of you, but I'm giving it 6. So, Chris, if we come to what from this you did like the most?
After thinking we wouldn't see her again after Joy of the World, I was thrilled to see Anita was back and rescue the Doctor, take him to the Time Hotel. It really reminded me of how Russell used the watch from Human Nature to bring back the Master. I'm not sure about Anita getting a house key that she can open a door anywhere. And I'm also not sure about her basically just keeping the door open, like some sort of doorstop for, a good part of the episode. But I love seeing her back, and I really love Steph Theatrics is really cool. So it's great that she was back.
Yeah, that was a good moment when she arrived. I didn't realise this at the time watching the episode, because watching the episode, I was very similar to you, that she's just kind of standing there, not doing anything. What I think partly explains it is, in the episode, Anita is pregnant. And it turned out that it wasn't Anita that was just pregnant, but Steph Dewali, the actor, also was. She was, I believe, as pregnant as Anita was. And it seems, I don't know 100%, but I think it's safe to assume that that was written into the show. So, we need Anita back. Who else is going to save the Doctor at this time? Can you do it, Steph? Yes, but one thing, I'm giving birth soon-ish. So I think that might partly explain okay, we're not going to ask you really to do much. Let's make a joke of you just standing there. So we do cut to her now and then saying, yeah, I just work in hotels and stuff.
It also speaks to just how many characters there were. And
Yes.
to just find something for everyone to do was difficult.
And we'll get into the amount of characters probably later, but that is a thing where you have we have so many characters, we kind of have a reason just to have her stand there. We don't want to ask Steph Dewali to do too much. Obviously some things are a bit more important than this show, so that I think partly explains why it was great to see her, but why she felt quite underemployed. Mike, what from this did you like the most?
My actual favorite moment of this whole thing, I liked that scene where everybody was in there arguing with the Ronnie.
And Melanie, we meet again. I thought you'd be dead. I thought there's no way that painted doll of a princess could ever survive.
I never thought about you once.
Oh, you thought of me every night.
Ronnie, the Time Lords were slaughtered. How did you survive?
I saw it coming, the genetic explosion. I had a split second, flipped my DNA, made a biological sidestep, survived the cunning.
How did you get to Earth? I have the only TARDIS in existence. Time ring. Poor baby.
It led me to you. Although that wasn't difficult. Find a stupid blonde Earth girl and there you are.
Excuse me?
Oh, it was so tedious putting up with you and your 57 mother.
I've never met you in my life.
All right, Rubes, darling.
Mrs. Flood.
That's my neighbour.
That's my neighbour.
They're both the Ronnie.
And it was so much fun to just have a bunch of characters that were saying, wait a minute, here's this, here's that, here's the other. You set it up really well with this idea, we got to turn the wish off. And Shirley's like, yeah, we have to get rid of this because me and people like me are being cast aside. And then Belinda's like, no, we can't do this. I'm going to lose my child. I loved that whole moment with Mel and the Ronnie just sort of spitting poison at each other. That was a lot of fun. And the Ronnie's grand entrance, like, here I am, I'm the villain. Let's have an argument. Let's have a discussion. Let me try to convince you to join me, was really a lot of fun to me. Kind of similar to what Chris was saying. The idea that you can just pick all these characters up and have them be there. Do they have to be there? Maybe not necessarily. But it's just a big sense of what we now call a shared universe, right? Doctor Who was doing this long before the Marvel Cinematic Universe was. But it's what we now call this, shared universe where all the characters reappear. I really enjoy that. That's just something I get a big kick out of.
My favourite part is, I guess, loosely linked to yours, Mike, and it's almost less a scene and more an overall theme that came through from this. And it's the Doctor as a Time Lord, which feels like I'm stating the obvious, but the appearance of the Rani, particularly the scene you referred to, Mike, when she shows up in Unit, the Rani is not shy at all in how she, and I think most Time Lords, see humanity themselves. And Ncuti's own energy as the Doctor slightly changed when the Rani showed up in that scene. Like the verbal face-off felt like a scene Ncuti particularly was really enjoying. Let's be honest, it's a scene that he essentially requested. The reason you're asking, I want this person to be a villain, is because I want to do scenes with him. And that scene in particular, he looked to be really leaning into it and quite enjoying himself. And what comes through in that is Rani says to Belinda that your cattle says that humans are almost a weird fetish, a weird fixation the Doctor has. And the Doctor doesn't refute that in the moment. It's not the main part of that scene, but if you watch when the Rani says that, it cuts to the Doctor and Belinda, and just watch the Doctor's face in that scene and how she plays that scene. When Rani appeals to the Doctor, she appeals to him as a Time Lord, not a Time Lord hanging around with humans, but as one of her people. And the Rani asks, don't you want to see Omega? And he pauses and he says yes. He doesn't try and stop them summoning him. He wants to also see Omega. And there's no human, and what's notable, there's no humans around. In some ways, you're seeing what a Time Lord is without humanity, almost to slightly dilute that Time Lord quality. This is just like my personal theory, part of the reason why I find Time Lords interesting. And this is where the show being created in the UK and mainly created of UK people, I think really comes through, because I've always viewed the Time Lords as the galaxies. I guess you'd say call them Ivy League, Oxbridge kids. They went to Oxford or Cambridge. They went to Eton. They went to the same schools that the royal family went to and stuff. They see humans as peasants, as the great unwashed. And it's notable whenever we've seen the Doctor meet another Time Lord, they often try to get them to you stop messing around with these humans. Like, you're not one of them. You're one of us. Can you maybe grow up now and join your people as you should? They often troll his affinity for humanity. I mean, this obviously happened long before this real world thing happened, but it does remind, there are some faint echoes, like real world echoes with Prince Harry here, where the Doctor does feel part of an aristocracy and ran away from that. We said it in a previous pod. None of the Time Lords are good people apart from the Doctor. They all seem pricks. They all are very superior. They carry themselves like they're superior. The Rani says we are she uses the word pure, and they really look their nose down at humans, and it's like, they look at the Doctor, why would you even want to hang around with them? You're better than them, and you're better than that. And that was a big theme that I grabbed from this episode. There wasn't as much time devoted to it as I would like. That can be the theme that you hang a whole episode over, but that part of the episode, I think, I really enjoyed the most. Mike, so if we come to what from this you like the least?
Belinda in a box. The Zero Room. Hi, Belinda, here's your child. Go stand in this box. Please step out of the way. Was kind of symbolic for what I felt happened to a character that I really enjoyed, that I thought was really effective, was really interesting. I think that Belinda got this motherhood cast upon her. I think it's more complicated than that it's something that we have to talk about a little bit in terms of what that means. It reminds me of some old Marvel comic stuff. It was just like, all of a sudden, oh, Ruby's back, and Belinda, go stand in a box. And that frustrates me. I get it. It's true to the character. It's a wonderful, powerful statement. Even when she's not sure if this is really her kid or not, she stands up and she's tough and she protects it. But they literally walked her off the screen and put her in a box. Like, stay over here. And that was just kind of nuts. And it really, really bothered me, because we've had so much fun, when I've been on this podcast talking with you and other folks, when I've been watching here at home. We love Belinda. Belinda's just great. I remember being just a little worried when she first showed up and like, oh, is this I want to go home stuff going to wear thin? But Belinda is really great, and I think she's really effective and just really fun. But it was like, oh, sorry, stand over there. Please hold the baby while we close this refrigerator door or whatever it is. I kind of thought something better could have been done with her. As much was going on and as complicated as everything was, it just took her right off the map.
Just like I talked about earlier with Anita, like it's just a symptom of what happens when you have so many characters. As a writer, he probably just said, all right, Anita's going to stand here, and then I don't have to think about her again until I need her. And then Belinda and Poppy are going to be in the box until I have to think about them again. When you have that many characters, if you don't give them all something to do, people are going to ask, like, why are they not having anything to do? I understand your point, absolutely, Mike, but I think that's probably why it ended up happening that way.
I agree. There's a lot of people on screen, but she's like really important. To me, it's kind of like, why are these other characters still running around free when they're not people that we've necessarily come to know and love? It would be very strange to take any character and say, here, take this baby, go stand in the box. But she's our companion. She's our guest star. She's our second build talent. I'm sure there are production reasons for it, but I don't know. I was hoping for better. I was hoping for a little bit more. Thinking back to the 10th Doctor story, right? We had everybody together, the Stolen Earth and all that good stuff. Everybody kind of had something to do. Even if it wasn't a huge thing, even Martha just sitting in a room saying, I don't know whether to push this button or not, is more than what Belinda, our second lead of the show, got to do.
This actually felt like the Stolen Earth Journey's End Mark II. It was a similar problem with this as it was with that episode. Too many, and I thought in that episode there were a few characters, or not enough consequence being given to certain characters that are on screen. It felt cool to have them on in the opening titles, but we didn't actually particularly need them. The Belinda criticism is one that I've seen online from a few people. I think it's pretty sound. The thing about Poppy being Belinda's child actually does make sense of the narrative of this episode, of Poppy's own importance and why she must be protected at all costs. But at the same time, it really, really harms Belinda's characterization, because her identity in this show, really apropos of nothing, begins and ends as mother. And just to be clear, because none of us are mothers, of course, there's nothing wrong with having a character who's a mother on the screen, mother whose priority to protect their child. That's totally fine. And it would be insulting to say she's only a mother, but her characterization began and ended with that. And all the rest of her personality that we saw over the previous 7 weeks, all of a sudden really dissipated very quickly. There is a way, because I always think if we criticize something, I do think it's important to try and at least say, well, what would you do instead? And a potential adjustment that could have been made, just to make it work slightly better, is you still have -10 and the box outside of time and space. You have to put Poppy in there because to try and stop her disappearing when the Wish World is erased. But when that's happening, Belinda then insists on going in. She says, well, she's not going in her own. I'm going in there with her. It would have maybe made it slightly better if she had to go in rather than chose to go in. So we can't leave Poppy in there on her own. You don't literally say this in the dialogue, but like someone has to go in there with her, and Belinda is the one who ends up going in there with her. So it's not like her identity and her decision-making is solely driven out of motherhood, but a fully rounded person. If you had someone have to go in there with her, I think that slightly helps. It doesn't fix everything, but it slightly helps the issue of like, what's her prime directive? That I think would have helped that a little bit. It's a problem that quite a few people have pointed out online. Of it's not even that there's a problem with what Belinda did in this episode, but what Belinda did in this episode compared to everything else we'd seen from her, it felt like it was two different people. I did it like just as into the craft when they are in the box and we have the unit fighting the Bone Beast and it's lots of explosions and noise, people shouting, and then it cuts to the box and it's total silence. And it's just those two in the box. That was, in a good way, almost quite eerie. That transition, that was just that as a moment, is how I feel about this episode. There are actually some individual, discrete, real strong stuff happening here. Just a scene here, a moment there, a theme here, but it doesn't fit all together as a cohesive whole. We look at the whole episode. But Chris, if we come now to what you like the least from this?
I would have to say the terrible way that Omega and the Ronnie are treated in this story for being...
Okay, this is... Go on, just say, this is also mine. This is my least favorite bit as well. Okay. Sorry, please continue.
No, Omega comes back and he's like some kind of soul-eating skeleton demon now. It just felt like he got turned into Sutekh Part 2. We just wanted a big monster like we had in last season. I mean, why call this thing Omega at all? You know, and he's there for like 3 minutes, and then suddenly the Vindicator is a gun. I mean, it is weird, I have to say, to see the Doctor using a gun-like weapon that way, because when Ncuti was cast and they remade the sonic screwdriver, they made it to look less like a gun because Russell was worried that kids were getting the wrong idea. And then here's the Doctor using a much bigger gun to solve a problem, which was so weird to me. It's a mixed message. If you want to redesign the sonic screwdriver, then fine, just do it. Don't make up some weird excuse for it. And then, then there's the Ronnie. I mean, she's there, as Mike talked about. That scene where she's explaining everything is okay, but she's there for basically the info dump about how the Time Lords are now sterile and why they're doing all this stuff. And that explanation to me doesn't exactly match up with what we saw in The Timeless Children anyway. And then like a few minutes later, Omega eats her. It just seemed like a wasted potential for both characters that people have waited a long time to come back. For those who want classic characters to come back, that's not necessarily my motivation for watching the show. And I've watched for a long, long time. But I mean, for those who care about those things, they've talked about Omega and Irani for a long time. And I just don't feel like they were treated right.
He looks like the thing that came out of the closet in Poltergeist. It didn't bother me as much as it bothered you, but yeah, I will agree. He was gone fast. You have a boss level fight in a video game, you're lucky if it ends up quickly.
This just seemed to be solved too quickly. I don't know if that was a result of rewrites that had to be done and it was meant to be a longer thing. Ultimately, it didn't work out that way, or I don't really know, but it just seemed really quick for something that should have been a pretty epic showdown of a character that the Doctor has met a couple times before.
You've actually lighted on what I suspect was the big problem here. The reshoots. The reshoots, I think, hurt the whole episode in general. And that's why I have sympathy for Russell. I don't see a clear way out of this because you basically have to take stuff from everything else because you have to add stuff on at the end for your regeneration. And it hurts everything else in terms of basic development. So there's a line, and this is when you know you're doing the reshoots, maybe get rid of this line, but there's a line where the Doctor calls Omega the most fearsome Time Lord in existence. He is not on the evidence of what happens in this episode. If you're going to have someone depicted or spoken of in that way, you have to show them doing that. He's also, I think generally some of the production work on this series, I think is pretty strong, but visually he's not that distinctive. He looks and is treated and dispatched like a monster of the week rather than your primary villain that you're building up to. I checked. All our villains, our notional antagonists, they are basically off the board in the 36-minute mark of the episode. There's still 30 minutes left. I mean, I understand why, given what happened, but when it happened, I was like, oh, okay, well, that's not generally how you want your climactic battle to go. I mean, even the Rani's plan, which we didn't have a lot of time for the episode to get into, it's actually not a million miles away from Killmonger's and Black Panther, which is a kind of a rebuilding her world and her people in her own despotic image. The Rani herself, at least this incarnation of it, is essentially an ethno-nationalist, refers to Poppy as contaminated, refers to the Time Lords as pure. This is very much like far-right speak. It would have worked anyway, but I think it works even better because Poppy herself is black. There's stuff that you can work with, but you don't have enough time to work with it because you got rid of them so quickly. You dispatched them so summarily. Yes, with the Archie Panjabi iteration of the Rani. Yes, with Omega. The problem as well, you do this, particularly in your final episode. This reminded me of Journey's End, which is an episode I like more than this, but I always struggled with how the Dr. Donna version of Donna dispatches the Daleks and Davros so easily. I mean, I understand in terms of the rules of the episode why that would happen. It's not like I don't get how she did it. I get how she did it. But you do make the Daleks look like chumps. And Omega and Irani, to an extent, kind of look like chumps. Yeah, they don't look threatening. They don't feel like, and I'm sure we'll get a return at some point, but they don't feel like when you get a return that you think, uh-oh, which is what you should think when you get a big returning villain like that. And another fundamental problem, this isn't because of reshoots, but we needed one big villain, not two. This is the same mistake Russell made in Doomsday. Having the Daleks and the Cybermen in Doomsday, having two big villains, did not increase the peril. It actually diluted it. It was subtraction by addition. And it's a similar thing here. Give us the Rani storyline, or give us Omega's storyline. Don't give us both, because it contributes, as we've already mentioned, to an overstuffed episode, crowded with too many people. And the episode just couldn't bear the weight of all those people. I just think if we'd have lost Omega in particular, I don't know what we're losing. I don't know if we're losing anything. So yes, like you, Chris, I was kind of like, oh, well, what was the point of that? I really didn't enjoy a lot of the first half of this episode at all. This was definitely the thing where I'm like, God, there's half an hour left. But I was also part thinking, good, because at least you've got some time to give us something, because up to now, this ain't been great. So if I come to you now, Chris, on one of the surprise, yes, I don't think anyone knew this was happening, but it's not a seismic shot that came out of nowhere. But we have two Doctors on screen in this episode. The 15th is joined briefly by the 13th. Jodie Whittaker's returned to the show since The Power of the Doctor. If I come to your thoughts, Chris, on Jodie's appearance.
Well, I saw somebody say online that we see more depth in that 5 minutes with the 13th Doctor than we did during her entire tenure the first time around. I wouldn't go that far. I mean, that seems like a big exaggeration, but I mean, it does kind of show how Chris Chibnall's writing was really the problem with the character and not Jodie Whittaker. What I realized the other day when I thought about it was that pretty much every regeneration story from Peter Capaldi onward has been a multi-Doctor episode. Matt Smith, too, if you're going to count how he cameoed in Deep Breath. I'm not sure why that's become a thing now. I mean, do we feel like we're raising the stakes to include past Doctors? Does it make things feel more special to have older Doctors just show up randomly and offer advice or guidance or just kind of be there? It was just something I thought about that hadn't really been a thing in the classic show at all, and hadn't really been a thing for the first few regenerations in the rebooted show either. So it was something that occurred to me that I thought was pretty interesting.
To me, it was just like, hey, Jodie, when we were watching here at home, we had the fact that a regeneration was coming spoiled. So I knew something was coming, but what was kind of neat was the last thing I expected was for Jodie to pop up. And what was really fun about it to me was it was like, hey, it's Jodie. So I get what you're saying, because I agree. We have seen a lot of Doctors lately, and I guess maybe that was part of the anniversary kind of feel. But yeah, they've been all over the place. But I forgot how much I enjoyed Jodie.
I'm not judging whether it's a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah.
But it was just something that I realized that I hadn't really thought about until that moment. But why do Moffat and Chibnall and now Russell feel compelled to, include these other Doctors in there when there's a regeneration now? I don't know. I mean, it just, you would think there's a whole lot of other stuff going on, especially with this episode in particular, and so much reshooting and other stuff that they had to do. So to put that element in there, I guess we're going for specialness and going for the social media squeeing of it, I guess.
There is this kind of idea, which relates back to the stuff that I was talking about from comic books. Marvel has long dealt with the idea of hype, and Marvel discovered a lot of things, and Marvel discovered how to promote with its own characters and to have characters be guest stars in other books. But when Gwen Stacy died back in 73, and the sales perked up, well, then all of a sudden it was like, oh, you do these big events, big things happen, and suddenly the sales rise. And then, in the 90s and the 2000s, it was all about events, and it was, what can we construct and what can we do? The DC actually had the big one when they killed Superman, right? And they got all this press coverage, and everybody was paying attention to me. So it was like, once you unleash, once that hype engine gets going, sometimes it rolls with its own speed. Maybe that might be part of the problem. Maybe that might be part of the issue, that they're just sort of caught in a cycle like that. One of Russell T Davies' mission was to promote the brand and push the product. I mean, at the very least, it's a reminder, hey, Jodie's got some Big Finish audios coming, go check them out. Or, hey, go back and buy Jodie's episodes. I liked it, but I'm glad she was the only one that showed up.
One thing I thought was interesting was they had her actually hug the 15th Doctor, and Chibnall was very much against her hugging people. I don't know whether he was worried about sexualizing the first woman Doctor or whatever, but she almost never hugged anybody, which was really weird considering how even 12th Doctor again was hugging people, and he definitely didn't like hugging people at the beginning. The 11th Doctor used to hug people all the time, and the 10th Doctor certainly did. Even grumpy Christopher Eccleston Doctor used to hug people sometimes. It was just interesting. I'm sure there's probably a fan right now who's screaming at this podcast, but what about that moment in episode whatever? But she definitely wasn't a big hugger like the other ones were.
I can never remember scenes where she did. And
there you go.
You weren't on the podcast at the time, Chris, but one of my big complaints during the Chibnall era was he was too afraid to have his characters feel anything.
Right.
It was almost like, no emotions, please, we're British. To Chibnall's defense, he did finally open characters up a little bit with Jodie's final episode, with The Power of the Doctor.
Right.
I really enjoyed this. It was ironic. I can't remember what episode it was of one of our podcasts, but It was recently, a few weeks ago, when we had Rick on, and Rick mentioned as an aside how he would have loved to have seen Russell write the 13th, and I agreed with him. And it's not just a theory now. How we've had a little sprinkling of what that would look like, and this was one of the stronger parts of the episode. A guy on social, I think his name's John Patterson, guy on social, made a good point recently. He was a big fan of it, and he himself explained in some good detail why this version of Jodie, even 2 minutes or so of her, worked quite well.
Part of my issue with 13's writing all throughout the Chibnall era was that she was often written as somebody who didn't really know what was going on, didn't really take control of the situation, often kowtowed to whoever was actually in the position of authority there. A lot of assumptions that she made were wrong. A lot of the information that she would gather would often be wrong. Chibnall wrote her as just kind of incompetent, and I didn't like that. It pissed me off. The way Russell writes her is that she's coming in, she's taking control of the scene, she's asserting her authority, she is also the Doctor, she is standing her ground, right, and she is giving the current leader in the room information that they didn't know, even though it's herself, i.e., she was written like the Doctor. She was written like the Doctor.
She's a lot more confident and has a Doctor-like arrogance, which the Doctors do kind of need. I mean, this is where the Time Lord socialization comes in. They do think themselves superior, and the Doctor does have an air of superiority, particularly when they're around humans. It also helped. There was no pressure on her to carry this episode. She was like a side dish, like a nice little side dish, not the main meal. I noted as well, when we're getting to the regeneration, that she brings a tone of optimism to reassure 15 with the regeneration. Don't go in fair. We got kind of a modern regeneration that's not maudlin, which is quite rare. A lot of them are. A lot of Russell's and Stephen Moffat's were. Chibnall's wasn't. I don't think Jodie's regeneration was maudlin. And I didn't need this. She's got nothing to prove. But it is the proof that Jodie can still do this and play this character. And it's become one of the pleasures of modern Doctor Who, is when someone plays the role and then you see them play it again once their run is over and you realise, they can still do this. In some ways, each of these actors are the Doctor forever. Whether it was we saw Paul McGann come back just before the 50th, like Jodie here, David Tennant when he plays the 14th, you are and I'm sure it'll be the same for Christopher Eccleston. I know he's obviously doing it in Big Finish. Christopher Eccleston, or if Peter Capaldi did it, or if Matt Smith did it, or if and when Ncuti does it, you're like, they can still do this. In a way, they are this character forever. And fans, that's how we'll always see them. We'll always see them as the Doctor no matter what. So it was a lovely surprise. It wasn't just hey everyone, it's Jodie Whittaker. It's it's Jodie Whittaker, and isn't she great? Look what we've done with her. It made me more infused on the off chance that we ever saw her again. And it might not be the last time. I definitely think there would be scope for a multi-Doctor episode with her in it. She bounced off and Ncuti really well, particularly with, and if you've seen the Doctor Unleashed, you'll know, with very little preparation. So she had a lot of time to really grasp it. And that also underlines the fact that, she can step back into this. Once you learn the language of being the Doctor, you always retain it. So that was definitely a plus point. So, Mike, if I come to you about the primary fallout from this episode, literally the end, the final shot, and it's more, rather than talking specifically about that, but we'll get into it, is more a question of, is looking at what happens right at the end, is that the only way to analyse this episode? Because if you looked online the hours and days after this episode, you'd think it was. Because apparently nothing else that happened in the episode mattered. And nothing else in the episode was worth talking about, apart from the end. And I'm saying that's a genuine question given everyone's reaction.
No, it was funny. So my daughter accidentally spoils this to my wife. And I told my daughter she's out of the will now. I was like, I raised you better than that. To her defense, she said, I was just so excited. And I assumed you knew. And so it exploded. And that's the ultimate hyping principle. We were talking about this idea of the way that Marvel hypes things and Disney's good at hyping things. And having this moment that just goes explosively viral is not necessarily a bad thing. It sure worked very well when, David Tennant's back. But that idea that it can fire out there, it shouldn't be the be-all and end-all of the episode. You don't want the 15th Doctor's last run to be, and introducing Billie Piper. But I think it's kind of a fascinating thing. I love Doctor Who for sometimes moments like this where it just throws a curveball And this is a show that I was addicted to cliffhangers before I understood what a cliffhanger was. And Doctor Who, I think that's the reason it got me. So this is really just the ultimate, or to me, this is really just the ultimate cliffhanger principle. It's a fascinating place to park the show, because if this is it for Disney, then we don't know where we're going. But even if we know we're staying with Disney, we still don't know what's happening. And we really don't know for sure that she's even the Doctor. And so I think that's a lot of fun, but it shouldn't be what the whole episode is. For an episode that has a lot of flaws, Ncuti Gatwa was all over this thing. And in some ways, he's holding it together through sheer power of performance. So there's other things that we should look at, but I'm not surprised. I loved it. I laughed so loud that my wife and my son got mad at me because I laughed over her little bit of dialogue. But to me, it was just so funny that, here, we've done it. We've thrown another curveball again. Let's see what happens. So yeah, I think it's worth talking about, but it's not the only thing.
Okay, Chris, will you spoiled, and then if you go on with your obviously thoughts on this?
I wasn't necessarily spoiled. I mean, I'm not a guy who actively seeks out spoilers or stuff like that. I do read, the Doctor Who Reddit. There was some sort of post about, is Billie Piper the next Doctor? And I thought, why would they do that? That doesn't even make any sense. When it actually happened, I guess I thought back to that and thought, well, I'm not 100% surprised, but I didn't feel like I was spoiled. I mean, I still wasn't 100% sure going into it there was going to be a regeneration at all. So that's how unspoiled I was. I mean, I kind of guessed it. You talked about, is this the only way to analyze the episode? I mean, it's in there because it's meant to shock people and start conversations, which Russell has been very good at in the last couple of years. I mean, some of the conversations that we end up having seem odd to have, like, let's redesign the sonic screwdriver so it doesn't look like a gun, which is kind of an odd discussion to have. Russell really, for all of his issues as a writer sometimes, he's really good at being a hype man. Like, everything is the greatest thing ever. Everything is, this is the Doctor's worst hour ever, that kind of thing.
He's a great enthusiast for the show.
Right. But
I think he always has. I think that's just him. I do think that's just who he is.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, I'm not saying that's a bad thing necessarily, but sometimes it can get a little bit tiring. Like, not every finale can be the best finale ever. I realize you have to say that so people will watch it. But anyway, that's a different thing entirely. The whole Billie Piper thing, bringing back a familiar face like that can be a fun idea if they hadn't already done it just 2 years ago. This time around, it just feels desperate. We're in a weird place in pop culture right now where TV and films are just happy to reuse and recycle so that audiences get that quick and empty, adrenaline hit. Like the last Star Wars movie trilogy, or you look at, let's bring Robert Downey Jr. back for the Avengers, or, we're going to reboot stuff rather than come up with new stuff. Russell has tried to put it out there that over the last couple of years that, of course, Doctor Who is not in this precarious place, that we're stable, that everything's fine. And of course, he has to say that. I mean, if he doesn't, then he's not doing his job well. But then he has actions like this that speak louder than those words, because he really has to push the big red nostalgia button again to get viewers who might have tuned out to tune back in and be like, oh, Billie Piper's back. The ending really pulled down. When I said my rating is 4, I mean, it just pulled the whole rating for the episode down. It just reminded me of all the complaints about 80s Doctor Who. The writing wasn't up to snuff a lot of times, stunt casting, and relying too much on canon stuff that your average viewers just aren't going to care about. That's a big reason why the show ended up getting canceled in the 80s in the first place. I mean, it was also because executives in the boardroom hated it. But, if it was popular and they hated it, it probably still would have kept going, It just feels like, are we repeating ourselves? Is history coming back around again? I try not to be one of those toxic fans online, but there are a lot of parallels there that are very worrying in terms of, what we've seen before and how this all turns out.
I'm not sure that anything could have stopped Michael Grade from wielding the scythe as he did. I wasn't around the 80s and I've heard some of the complaints. The one, I think, big difference between now and then, I wouldn't say the stunt casting thing, but I mean, and we'll get into this in our whole series review, but this series generally has actually been pretty good. So I don't think the overall, in the aggregate, the overall writing of this show, I'm worried about.
Right.
But even though I wasn't a massive fan of the finale.
I mean, arguably,
so
the end of the classic series, the last couple years of the classic series were really better written than some of the stuff that had come before. But again, like, it didn't stop it from being canceled. Even like a 1 or 2 season upswing in terms of the writing wasn't enough to make it stick around. I mean, the point about Michael Grade is a good one, but if it was getting like 10 million viewers, I mean, it would have been harder for them to cancel it.
Going into the history of British television, I believe Emma spoke about this on her old Doc 2 podcast, but I understand that they basically counter-program the show against some of the most popular stuff on other channels and other networks. Yeah. So part of the reason the ratings were as they were, it's like if you put like Doctor Who against like the NFL. Yeah. Right. It's like, well, we know what's going to win. It doesn't really matter how good Doctor Who is. Right. They were kind of setting it up to fail.
There was also one time I came and we talked about Ace a little bit, and one of the things I found out when I was doing research for that article was that it was very hard at the end of the classic series to get anybody to take the show on. Nobody looked at Doctor Who and said, I'm going to cut my teeth and become well known by joining a program that's clearly towards its end. If we're talking about factors that did it in, that was another factor that kind of finished it off. Like a lot of things in pop culture, it was an overdetermined phenomenon. A while back, you were talking about this in one of the podcasts I was on. Doctor Who's not going to go away. Not going to disappear. But if they're going to keep it with Disney or another streaming service, the stakes are really high. So to me, doing a big moment like that, doing a big spectacle like that is an interesting place to leave it. It's a way to kind of say, hey, don't you want to see more? But not disagreeing. I'm just, have a different perspective on it, I guess.
I mean, the only counter argument I would make there, Mike, is think of all the genre TV shows that ended on a big cliffhanger and then got canceled anyway. There are no guarantees that things are going to come back just because you end on a cliffhanger.
Oh, I totally agree. And my favorite example would be Farscape. I don't know if you watched Farscape.
Absolutely. There's another good one, right?
It's not a guarantee, but it's a shot that I think is worth taking, I guess.
I can actually give you a British example and a loose Doctor Who connection. It happened to Stephen Moffat, but earlier in his career. He did a contemporary adaptation of the Jekyll and Hyde story. This is before Doctor Who came back, and that ends on a cliffhanger. I mean, a few things I noticed from the ending. I think not the only reason, but part of the reaction, I suspect, is because fans didn't have an official opportunity to build up to move on from Ncuti as a Doctor. Now, like you, Chris, I didn't know for certain we were getting a regeneration, but I did know it could happen. Mm-hmm. There have been rumours for months that they did reshoots in February. They'd filmed the series, but then Ncuti came back to film more, and what they were filming was a regeneration. That's been in the ether for a while. So I knew it was a possibility, and we get that confirmation when he's in the TARDIS at the end that, okay, that's what's happening. But this is the first time in the modern era of the show that we didn't get an official announcement the Doctor was leaving. Right. Every other time we've known the Doctor was leaving, we've known we're building up to a regeneration. We're partly tuning in to watch the regeneration. Often we know who's next. We know who they're regenerating into. That didn't happen here. And I've seen that some reaction online, some of the talk about Ncuti's time as the Doctor. And I think it's because fans, if they'd have known they couldn't have known from the start because it wasn't a plan, but had they known from like March, they might have had a bit more time to, like, they're going through the stages of grief and they haven't properly processed it all. And I think that in part explains some of the volcanic reaction from some fans on the potential, and we'll see if this is what happens, TBD, but this is a school of thought that why Billie Piper's face, potential link is, and this might explain why Russell wrote it that way, is, as we all remember from Partner of the Ways, Rose absorbs the time vortex. How does Ncuti's Doctor end up coming to his end? He fires his regeneration energy into the time vortex of the TARDIS. That might explain why that face. Another observation I've seen, it's a good one, that a lot of more recent generations are directly linked to the Doctor's past. It is Matt Smith regenerating into someone with the face of someone the Doctor met quite recently. Jodie's face changing into Tennant's face. Ncuti's face changing into Rose's face. There is kind of a reason. It's almost like a consequence of past actions. The Doctor leaves a lot trailing behind them. There's that great line from the film Magnolia, you may be done with the past isn't done with you. I'm not saying that's what's happening here. That is a way to make it partly make sense. Also, I hadn't thought of this, but there is a line, and this is in the reshot scenes, that initially when Wishworld has been removed, there are a few things missing or things that have changed in the world. I believe it's Susan Twister, the border between, or someone at Unit says the border between Norway and Sweden has changed. Mm-hmm. That's a potential reference to Bad Wolf Bay, the last we saw of Rose. And neither of you two said this. This isn't aimed at either of you two, but some people saying Rose is the Doctor. Rose, whatever happens, it doesn't look like Rose is the Doctor. Billie Piper appears to be the Doctor. Yes, it's the same actor, but I don't think Rose Tyler is suddenly going to be operating the TARDIS. Here's basically where I land with this. There's only two questions that I think are the real main questions that matter here that have to be answered by each fan. And each fan may have different opinions. These are not rhetorical, these are subjective questions. First of all, can Billie Piper, the actor, play this character? And can Russell T Davies, the writer, write this character? Unless the answer's no, some of the absolute head loss I've seen is way too premature. It's just too early. And Mike, I think you used words, we don't know. And that's where I am with this. I'm agnostic. I feel about this the way I felt about when the Timeless Child storyline dropped. I feel about this, you mentioned Robert Downey Jr., Chris, when we found out he's playing Doctor Doom. I don't have a strong opinion on that either way, because I don't know what we're getting. I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know how it's going to fit in the story. I don't know what the character will be with the Timeless Child. And I believe I said so I'm pretty sure the receipts are out there on our Timeless Child podcast. I said, let's see what it is. And I didn't really like what Chibnall did with it. I like a lot more what RTD did with it. This Billie Piper, possibly, again, we don't know 100% she's playing the Doctor. We know she's returning in some form. I want to see what it is. And when I see what it is, then I know how to feel about it. I don't really feel anything about it right now because I don't know. No one knows. But some fans are speaking as if they do. And not anyone here, of course, but there has been some behaviour from fans. Put it like this, behaviour from fans. Doctor Who fans cannot look at ourselves, and often, look, the Venn diagram's a circle anyway, but we can't look at fandoms from other IP and act like we're superior. Because Doctor Who fans have shown the past couple of weeks that they're not. Because it's fine to not like, it's fine to hate this episode. It's not fine to be jumping in people's social media mentions and saying you need to get sacked, you need to be fired, get the fuck out of my show, what the fuck are you doing coming back? Like, that's just never okay. And it's the kind of shit that gets associated with fans from other fandoms. And I think Doctor Who fans have shown that they're the same, sadly for worse as well as better. To come back to my original point, is looking at the ending the only way to analyse this episode? It shouldn't be, but some fans seem to feel it's impossible to be. But because of that, it means we're not actually talking, and I mean the royal we. Obviously, we can do this now right here. But some fans haven't spoken about some aspects of the episode that, like, this was such a promising part of the reality war that we didn't follow through on, and I was really disappointed by. There's potentially a really fascinating narrative dilemma here, which comes up in Unit, the scene that we've mentioned when the Rani shows up, which is, we're trying to end Wishworld. Because obviously, we're trying to end Conrad's world. Who wants to live in this? This is horrible. But if we end it, we might end Poppy at the same time. And you're in a dilemma of, do we kill this baby and end this world, or do we let this dystopia continue and leave this baby alive? And you have the scene, I mean, this was a good scene when Belinda's like, well, I'm not sacrificing my child for anything. Like, if that had been the narrative thread of this whole episode, and a Sophie's choice, you could have done something really good with that. And we didn't get that because of the other demands and what the episode had to do. That was one of the things that really hurt this episode. Another thing is, it felt like so much was happening that nothing could sink in, and there's no, like, character moments. There actually are quite a lot. And I only noticed in the rewatch. The problem is because there's so much to get in, the editing is so quick. Stuff moves on like this bit, then this bit, and this bit, and this bit. So every now and then, you get something where a character would say something, do something, and you get a reaction shot from someone, and you don't get the reaction shot, or you get the reaction shot, and it's like half a second. So you don't have a time to really sit with the consequences of what's happening and what we're going into. And that's not because the editor is bad, but because we are trying to cram this all into, like, the whole thing is an hour, 6 minutes. And we've kind of spoken about some of the issues with the reshoots. The moment from when the Doctor appears in Belinda's garden to actually regenerating, that's 10 minutes. That's a whole 10 minutes of screen time that could have gone elsewhere and would have gone elsewhere And I'm not even including the extra scene in Unit. I mean, that's also more screen time. That, I think, is a fundamental problem with the whole episode, because all of a sudden now, I'm sure we had something written that was fairly well structured for an hour, and all of a sudden I was like, oh, we need to lose about 15 minutes, because we now have to film other stuff with the Ncuti leaving, and you have to film it. I'm not saying you shouldn't. Of course you have to film it. But it now means you're losing stuff you probably didn't want to lose, and that would have helped certain scenes and certain themes and aspects of character bring together. Maybe we could have got more of Belinda as a mother, for example, if we had more time. Ironically, for a time travel show, we didn't have the time. And I think that is part of the issue with this episode. And ironically, talking about Wish World, I do wish, but literally no more wishes, but I wish that more of the discourse had been around that and not around Billie Piper as the Doctor. Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of positivity as well. It's been very polarizing. Billie Piper's a Doctor, yay. Billie Piper's a Doctor, cure Russell. And that's just where all the discourse has been. And full disclosure for our listeners, we're recording this 2 weeks after the episode. I deliberately wanted to give time, just to give me a moment to breathe. But I thought, no, we're not going to record this as soon as we usually do. I want to try and give everyone a moment to maybe settle down. The temperature was intense and everything was acidic and sharp. And it felt like no one could have anything of assembling a rational conversation about this show.
For many years, I've seen people online, like on Reddit and elsewhere, say, why can't we have a surprise regeneration where we don't know the Doctor's leaving and we don't know who the new Doctor is going to be? Finally, it happens. Boom, here it is. And then fans are like, well, yeah, but not like that. Would it have been different if it was somebody apart from Billie Piper? I don't know. I mean, we're never going to know the answer to that. But it was interesting to watch and see what some of the commentary was like and see what some of the emotions were like.
Yeah, I mean, I think you intentionally or otherwise, Chris, you've stumbled onto what should really be the mantra for fandom, just all types of fandom in this current generation we live in, which is, I want this. No, not like that.
Goes back to the whole idea of headcanon. This is my headcanon.
And I said it in an episode of Fandom. You're not writing the show. The writers are writing the show.
Fandom is pretty much the same. It's just that we now live in the internet age where we can all see what everybody's thinking. Mm-hmm. But you can go back and you can find, go back and look when they killed Jean Grey in the X-Men. People go nuts in the letters page. Go back and find when they killed Gwen Stacy in Amazing Spider-Man. It's in the letters page. The difference is it's a more editorialized process. Now, thanks to the miracle of the internet, whether we want to or not, we get everybody's thoughts simultaneously. I don't know if it's like the nature of fandom has changed so much as it's just our awareness of the change. I think people, fans, we talk about this theoretically, fans make an investment. You can make a model. I've invested part of myself in this show. And if this show does something that you don't like, that impacts you. It comes back into place on you. Now, does it kill you? No. Does it injure you? No. But it does have some impacts. And I'm not saying this to excuse the kind of toxic fandom things that we see. Get upset about who they picked. But to me, it's kind of, see what they do. If Billie Piper's the Doctor, see what happens. We don't know what's going to happen. Could just be a Christmas episode. Could just be whatever. Could be 3 episodes like David Tennant got. All of those things will occur. But it's, at this point, you can't be surprised by the show being surprising, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I mean, I guess what frustrates me is the great thing about Doctor Who, and I've said this a lot, and I'm not the only one who says it, is you can go anywhere, you can do anything. Doctor Who is like the only show that you could cross over with pretty much any other show or movie, and it would make sense, really. You could make it make sense. But I guess the thing that frustrates me is when you have all those possibilities, when it feels like you're retreading old ground, like, let's bring back David Tennant. And then 2 years later, let's bring back Billie Piper. And then 2 years from now, well, who are we going to bring back 2 years from now? If this is how we have to maintain interest in the show among the casual viewers, and casual viewers are really what make the show work in the long term, I don't know that that's a show I want to watch.
No, I get it.
And your point about toxic fans, I mean, and just fan complaining in general, you just have to look back at the 80s and Doctor Who Bulletin and all that stuff, where it was a fanzine that basically had a vendetta against the show that the magazine was named after. It's not new. It's just the internet just accelerates it. As you said, Mike, it means we all know what each other is thinking.
I definitely take your point, Chris, and obviously it's subjective what you want from the show. I'm always like, are the episodes good? So I actually don't think Tennant as 14 was the same as Tennant as 10. I think you played it differently. I have no idea what Billy Piper's going to do with this character. But are the episodes good? And like, Tennant's run wasn't long, and I was glad it wasn't long. I don't look back on that and think that was a wasted 3 episodes. I look back and I wasn't a massive fan of Wild Blue Yonder, but there were 2 out of 3 really strong episodes, and I don't regret that period at all. I'm fine with it if the episodes are good, but you need to have something specific to say with them. The same with Billy Piper. You ain't got nothing to say with her. It's going to be a shit show, and that will not be fun for anyone. Yeah, Chris, if we just come to any observations that we've missed.
We've talked about this a little bit, about the various rewrites that were necessary and what the episode was really supposed to be like and how it was supposed to end and all the reshoots and stuff. The one that clearly comes out worse in all of it is Susan. I mean, they built up
100%.
over 2 episodes. She's a vision for the Doctor. He sees her, whatever. And then she's not in one frame of the finale.
Could argue they've been building this up since The Devil's Court.
Yeah.
Because she's mentioned then. I remember people saying, why? Susan's never been mentioned by the Doctor. Why are they mentioning her now?
Right. 12th Doctor had a picture of her on his desk, in the college, I get your point, though. So they built all this up, and then she's not even in there at all. I mean, and the problem I have is Carol Ann Ford is 84 years old now. I'm not trying to be grim, but like, assuming a show is renewed and it takes a year for like filming to start again, I mean, she could be gone or she could be too sick to do the episodes. I mean, she deserved to have that kind of like tied up in some way. Why bring her back after 20 years and then drop her? Like, I get why, because I'm sure when they had the original episode, they didn't know Ncuti was leaving. I get it. But like, they could have like figured out a way to drop her in there somehow and just given some kind of closure. So that frustrates me a lot, especially as a fan of the classic show, but also just a fan in general. Like, they had 20 years to bring her back and they finally do it. And then is it going to ever have any kind of closure to it? I mean, I did like that brief moment where Mel meets the Ronnie and gives her the old stink eye, That was kind of fun because obviously they had met before in the classic show. The Wish Baby. The final wish from the Doctor is to have no more wishes. Does that mean the magic stuff is done in Doctor Who? Like, is this Russell's way to kind of wrap up that whole part of it? I mean, did resetting the universe again kind of, mean that this is it for the Pantheon and we're moving on? And most importantly, does it finally cancel out the Mavity joke? Can we just be done with that? Like, it was funny like the first 10 times, but it wasn't funny after that. There's been a lot of talk about how Ncuti leaving a role without ever meeting any Daleks.
Yeah, that came up, I think, a lot because he said, I think maybe early on, that I think the quote is I'd be upset if I didn't meet a Dalek. I think he didn't mean that I'd literally be upset, but I think I'm going to be a Doctor,
right.
so I'd like to.
I mean, there wasn't even like a one scene in series 10 where they had the one scene where somehow the Doctor and Bill end up in the future and they meet Daleks for like 5 minutes. Like, there wasn't even like a 5-minute like one-off scene where he's like in there with a Dalek, and that was kind of disappointing.
I'll be honest with you, with that, like, obviously thank you so much for your service, Ncuti, but I'm like, well, you want a Dalek, you want to be around Dalek that much, stick around.
Right, exactly. Well, yeah, precisely, yeah. And the only other thing I wanted to say is that I predict, like, in 5 years or less, we're going to learn what the real behind-the-scenes story is here, with this episode. I mean, we're going to find out for real, like, what the ending was supposed to be like, what the changes were, how it all went down. Maybe it's even wilder than what we think we know right now. How much was hamstrung by the rewrites and how much could have actually been done differently.
I could not agree with you anymore. Anyone who's read The Writer's Tale or listened to Stephen Moffat's exit interview, I think when you sometimes realize the difficulties writers have with this show, we would be a lot more sympathetic, I think, on occasion. It doesn't mean that we think a bad episode's a good episode, but yeah, a lot of fans I don't think understand just how difficult it is to get anything on screen in just television, generally. This show is even more difficult. This show, given some of the constraints we know about, I think if and when, and I would hope it's sooner than 5 years to be honest, but if and when we find out, I totally agree, Chris. I think fans will be more inclined, and fans may go to their social media and maybe delete a few posts.
Yeah.
But yes, I do agree with you, and I'd be fascinated to know.
Yeah, I think it's too fresh right now, and people are still feeling obligated to hold on certain kind of secrets or things that they don't want to tell right now. But I think it'll be 5 years or less. I mean, maybe it'll be a year, maybe it'll be next month. But some producer or behind the scenes person or whatever is going to write a memoir, give an interview, and shed more light on how that whole thing went down. I was no big fan of the Chris Chibnall era, but I would read a book that was all about what happened behind the scenes and what went wrong, and were they really producing like first drafts of scripts. I would read that book. It'll be interesting to see what comes out in the future about all that.
That's what's kind of fun about the Unleashed story, is watching all of those people scurry around behind the scenes making all of that stuff happen. And then you realize, wow, these people are working pretty hard.
And not just that. That is, you're right about all those people. That's, by the standards of the genre, a quite small production. Sorry, Mike, do you have other observations as well beyond that?
The only thing I was going to say, the only thing I don't think we've talked about is I don't like that Conrad got a happy ending. I think it's a great thing about Ruby, that Ruby wished for him to be happy. That's very her. At one point she says, Conrad, I want to thank you. This could have been so much worse. And it's like, I don't know. I don't know if this guy deserves to be thanked. In some way, he's the embodiment of a toxic fan, if you think about it. I don't want him to end up, what's the name of the guy? First season episode, the
Adam. The wealthy guy.
Henry Van Statten.
Van Statten, right. So Van Statten gets brainwiped and lives on the street. Conrad's kind of awful, and I guess it's nice that he was kind and good, but he really did terrible things. And we've talked about this idea of motherhood and whether, Belinda is now forced to be a mother or whatever, but in a weird sort of way, it's Conrad's fault that she has a child. It's not her idea. It wasn't the doctor's idea. And you can say all these great, wonderful things about children being memories that come together and their wishes and their dreams. And, I believe that way too. But maybe if Conrad just hadn't been such an outright jerk, a lot of things wouldn't have happened the way that they happened. So I think Conrad, sometimes he was advertised as part of the Unholy Trio. I think when the doctor explained who the Unholy Trio was, he wasn't up there. But he's a villain. He's at least General Hux, right, from Star Wars. He's a bad guy, and maybe he was helpful, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he deserves the happiest of happy endings.
It's not so much that's what he deserves in terms of good behavior is rewarded, bad behavior is punished. It's a wider comment about abusive people and how abusive people usually come from traumatic circumstances themselves. And if you really want to stop the trauma, you don't stop it by punishing them, as good as that might feel. We may want Conrad to get punished. And Ruby says before meeting him, can I punch him? But in the moment, she realizes that the best way to stop this, because Conrad's going to exist in this corrected world, what's to stop him doing the same thing again? What's to stop recidivism? It's a very trite thing to say. You don't fight fire with fire. You fight it with water. That's how you put fire out. And it's in keeping with this show, although I don't actually think in keeping with Russell as a writer. I think of Russell's writing, I think in many of his other shows, a character like Conrad would be severely punished. In very much in kind of a slightly grandstanding way. It makes you feel good, but might not actually be the best thing holistically. But in Doctor Who, what message you send to young children if this person gets severely punished? I think it was a conscious choice to actually show, here's what this person can be if this person was loved the way that everyone deserves to be. As much as we may like to see him punished.
Maybe if they'd fleshed him out a little better. Very important. It says a lot about Ruby. It says more about Ruby than it says about Conrad. But the Ronnie gets eaten. Omega, he gets fried. To me, Conrad is kind of beyond the line of kind redemption. What he does to her is horrible in Lucky Day. I totally agree in the real world, but we're not necessarily in the real world. So to me, he's just past the line. He's not the guy that out of cowardice caused something to happen. He's just kind of this awful person.
I probably agree with you. I think Russell wouldn't. Sorry, Chris.
No, I was just going to say the idea of forgiveness is a long-standing thing in the new series, especially having to break the cycle by having some kind of forgiveness. There's the 12th Doctor's big speech in the Zygon episodes where, that's the whole point of it. The Master in, the end of Series 3 wants to destroy the whole universe and whatever. And at the end, the Doctor's still like, well, I forgive you. At least it's a long-running theme earlier, even in this season. I mean, the barber gets forgiven. I mean, the barber wants to like unravel everything. The only one who doesn't really get any kind of forgiveness in this season is Kid.
To Mike's point, it says more about Ruby. That's the key thing. It's Ruby shows Conrad the mercy, not the Doctor, not Belinda, not Unit. I don't think they would. But it is in keeping with Ruby the character, and it is in keeping with the show. Now, I think, for example, if something similar happens in the war between the land and the sea, I'm not sure we're going to get as much clemency, because I don't think that show's aimed at the same audience. Mm-hmm. But this show, it made sense for that character to do that in this show. My observation, I noticed this immediately, this is exactly the same as the last series, leading to Empire of Death. You get the recap of the last episode, then you go into the credits. There was very little recap coming into the reality war, all of 18 seconds, and then it's credits. It's exactly the same last time, and both times I remember thinking, you got a lot to get in, don't you? Because that pre-credits, like if you hadn't watched the episode, you really wouldn't know what was going on. It almost felt like a waste of 18 seconds. And I think that explains no Susan. I have no doubt stuff was written for Susan and maybe filmed for Carol Ann Ford. This is what I said. The whole regeneration and reshoots probably about 15 minutes, and that's where scenes start to go. And I think that's where Susan went. And hopefully stuff has been filmed. So very worst case scenario, you can still use it if we do your future episodes. There's a good line early on when Anita's returned the Doctor to Wishworld, but the Doctor is the Doctor, not John Smith. And Anita's explaining how the world, every time May 23rd repeats, the world gets a bit thin and there are gaps, but people are compensating for things falling apart. Again, one of those things I really like from the episode, even if the whole episode didn't cohere, the people compensating for things falling apart, like real life. And case in point, we are a day removed from America's own stormtroopers storming the streets of Los Angeles. I'm sure a lot of people saw it on the news, but what did everyone do? Today, you woke up, you did what you normally do. You maybe spent time with your family. You maybe went to work. You maybe went and did something social. You maybe recorded a podcast. You compensate even when things are falling apart elsewhere. I missed this, and someone pointed out online, and it's very obvious when you look at it. The books, Conrad, if you look at like the design of the books and the nature of the title, it's a very none too subtle shot of J.K. Rowling, which I'm all for. It's kind of obvious, like, oh yeah, of course that is, but I didn't even notice that at first. And on that, probably another shot, J.K. Rowling. Rose, as in Noble, not Tyler. Rose not existing because Conrad can't even envisage or imagine her is actually a very good idea in and of itself. Another thing that's really good, but doesn't fully function in this episode because Yasmin Finney gets almost nothing to do. And I like the idea, but it felt like maybe save that for something else. You could do more with that. You can't now because you've already used it. So that felt like good, but not as good as it could have been. This was almost my least favorite thing. The Bone Beasts v Unit battle felt like an excuse for an action scene. Oh, it's the last episode, so we need a big fight. No, we don't. You don't need it. There's no reason it has to happen unless you have a clear storytelling reason. Like, the toy maker using the galvanic beam on the unit roof in the giggle, there's a clear story. You do need that scene. You can't not have that. And him killing members of unit at random, that's totally for fun. That's actually very good, that scene. There was no need for any of this. I mean, how much money do you think that cost to animate those bone beasts? That's probably the most expensive stuff in the episode. And it didn't feel like the worst scene in the episode, but it felt the most pointless. In terms of some of the stuff we didn't get because of time, I could have lost all of this. And maybe we need to see unit stuff because we've got the war between the land and the sea coming. Maybe that's another reason it's kept in. I'd have happily lost all of this. It's just a total waste of time.
I bet they filmed all of it and they had like a lot of the, CGI done for it. And then Ncuti said, I'm leaving. And they're like, all right, we've already sunk so much money into this that we have to leave it in there somehow.
I think that's a fair point.
It's what they call the sunken cost fallacy, like we've already too much money into this that we have to use it somehow.
I think that's a very fair point because, this would have been filmed actually a lot earlier and we've spent the money on this, so there's no way we're not having it now. That's probably true. So I think it was Chris Mooney in his review felt like the Poppy storyline maybe is an allegory for, and this is true psycho armchair analysis, but Poppy being in this is to do with RTD's own personal anxiety at not having a child. So you're trying to put RTD on the couch and none of us know him like that, so we don't know. But it was a point. I was like, I hadn't thought of that. Parenthood is a huge part of this episode. It is a running theme throughout the last two series. You think all the way back with Ruby as well.
There are a lot of babies. There's a lot of babies in the last two seasons. You know, there's Ruby, there's the space babies, there's the Wish baby, there's the random babies that the Sunday family have. There's just a lot of baby stuff. Obviously the baby that gets kidnapped in the Christmas episode by the goblins. And whether I want to put any kind of armchair psychology on it or not, I wouldn't go that far, but it is interesting to know how many babies have been in these episodes the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think exactly that. Like, I don't want to come with massive declarative conclusions, but it is definitely something worth mentioning. I don't know if many people notice this, and some might disagree, but in the end, Poppy is Belinda's child, biological child, that she had with a guy called Richie Akingbola. From that surname, we can deduce, I think, West Africa, probably Nigeria, with that surname. Very likely a dark-skinned black man. Fine. Poppy still looks a little bit too dark to be Belinda's biological child. It's not the worst example of it. The worst example will always be The Cosby Show, trying to tell me Lisa Bonet is biologically Felicia Rashad and Bill Cosby's daughter. So when it was like, oh yeah, this is really my child, I just really thought, nah, she ain't. She's too dark to be your child. Like, I get Richie and we never see him, of course, might be a very dark, black-skinned guy himself. Fair enough. It's not impossible. It's just a little bit unlikely. It didn't ruin it, but I did. Something else I noted. This was almost my favourite thing of the episode. The visual rendering of Poppy disappearing. Some people say Russell doesn't do subtle. I thought this was really subtly and skillfully done.
Oh, yeah.
With the folding of her coat, and it just gets smaller and smaller, and then it disappears. And then the coat disappears, and Ruby's the only one that notices. It's really well shot. It's really well cut. The performances are great. If I had to pick out an individual scene from this episode, it was this. I thought this was tremendous. Excellent work from all involved. And it's like a moment of horror without gore, but it's true horror because you're seeing it happen. And it's like sands going through your hands. There's nothing you can do to stop it. You don't want that to happen, but you realise it's almost inevitable in that moment. And I just do wonder, with reality restored, with the Doctor sacrificing themselves, there is a scope, maybe not even under Russell, but another writer in the future, of that reality isn't exactly the same as when the Doctor first met Belinda. What the Doctor's doing, shifting reality by 1 degree using the power of Time Lord biology. I mean, it's a science. It's not an exact science. It is very easy to say in a future episode, yeah, we overcorrected, or we didn't get as far as we wanted, or we go to the next episode, Billy Piper comes out the TARDIS, and, the US is a colony of the UK or something. Just something might not have worked exactly as planned. But yes, that's my observations. So, Mike, if we come to your MVP for the episode.
Oh, it's Mr. Gatwa again. What a way to go out. This era, that idea that's at the end of the scene between Jodie and Ncuti is so true. This wanted to be longer, wanted to stay longer. We want them to be there longer. But he's just been amazing. And he's often, there's incredible big moments. There's, always the great Doctor bits, oh, here's my speech and here's my action and here's these things. But there's just such wonderful small character bits. Him moving when he sits on the floor and plays with Poppy. I mean, it's just so genuine and so nice and so sweet. And I saw the behind the scenes stuff, where they talked about how well he got along with the little girl that played Poppy. If you're going to go out on top. And it would be very hard for me to look back, and that's not really what we're trying to do here today. It would be very hard for me to look back and say, oh, this is the one moment where the 15th Doctor didn't work out. This one time, Ncuti Gatwa was phoning it in. It's just been incredible, and it's really great to see him kind of hold the chaos of this episode together with the power of his performance.
If we come to your MVP, Chris?
I mean, I agree. It would be hard not to pick Ncuti for the MVP for his own regeneration story. I mean, that would be kind of wrong, in my opinion. Despite obvious chaos behind the scenes, with so many rewrites and so many reshoots and all that stuff, he did the best that he could do with the material he got, and then some. He got some really epic final scenes. I mean, even if they didn't quite join up exactly right. Individual scenes are really great. It's how they all fit together that didn't quite work for me anyway. Russell has always had the dictum of, if it feels right, then it doesn't have to all join together correctly. But I mean, a lot of it just didn't feel right together, and that kind of ruined it for me a little bit. I will say I'm a little disappointed about interviews that he's done since the finale where he said, "Oh yeah, it was always the plan that I only do 2 seasons." Does anybody really believe that?
No one believes that.
All the evidence points to the contrary on that one. Just admit that he wants to move on. We're adults. We know how the entertainment business works. We can handle it. Be honest with us. Don't try to say, "Oh, it was always going to be like that." No one believes that, and it kind of just annoys me a little bit when we're being given that line and clearly can't possibly be true.
So Ncuti is also my MVP. I don't think there's a lot of competition, to be honest, for this. Once we get the villains out of the way and we're in the final half hour, it felt we got to what this episode's really about. It felt like a real episode of 2 halves, and we end up having scenes of just a lot more conversations and a lot less effects by the regeneration, of course, and just a lot of acting, just like standard acting, dialogue, talk about important stuff. And Ncuti and Friday Setti was very good in these scenes as well. And this comes back to my earlier point about what I like the most. When Ruby says Poppy's missing, and the Doctor and Belinda, who's Poppy? You actually get the feeling the Doctor knows, or has an idea of what Ruby's talking about, but refuses to acknowledge it. And he becomes, and this is part of what I always love about this character, he becomes very Time Lord when he's with Ruby initially. He's obstructionist, he's superior, he's almost gaslighting Ruby at one point. That's what a Time Lord is like without humans. And it does fit that it's the humans that stop him going full Time Lord. It is Ruby. And then eventually Belinda convinced the Doctor that there's someone missing and you have to try and find them. Those scenes when Ncuti's he's been a dick, and we didn't get enough time with him to see that side of his Doctor, but I imagine he probably liked getting to channel that side because he hasn't had much chance to. And as we get close to his end, his reactions, I've always thought his reacting has been elite, particularly if you look at scenes with Jodie, how he's reacting to some of the stuff Jodie's saying. And despite the issues I have with the reshoots, I think his work, so essentially I think it's from the minute they go back into unit. Like, if you want to pay attention, go and look at Millie Gibson's hair. Mm-hmm. That's to let you know when the reshoots were done. I think his work was exceptional in those scenes, and he was wonderful and compelling and engaging and watchable and Doctor to the end. Okay, so if you have any thoughts on what we've spoken about here, you can email us at analysingdoctorwho@gmail.com. That's analysing spelt with an S. And we're across social media at analysingdw. So Chris, Mike, thank you for both being here.
Thanks for having me back.
Always pleasure.
And thank you for listening. We'll be back in a few weeks to analyse the entire last series of Doctor Who. Until next time. Our logo was courtesy of Scott Mattison. His work can be found at planetrisecreative.com and on Twitter at planetrise. Our theme tune is by Mike Mould. We can be reached at analysingdoctorwho@gmail.com and on Twitter at analysingdw.